Hi, you're listening to After Dinner Conversations, short stories for long discussions. What that means is we get short stories, we select those short stories, and then we discuss them specifically about the ethics and the morality of the choices the characters and the situations put us in. Why did you do this? What makes you do this? What makes us good people? What's the nature of truth, goodness, all of that sort of stuff. And hopefully we're all better, smarter people for it and learn a little bit about why we think the way we think. So thank you for listening. Welcome back to After Dinner Conversation, short stories for long discussions, where we take the short stories that are published on the website and on Amazon through After Dinner Conversation, and we pick some of the best ones and we discuss them. We talk about the morality and the ethics about the stories, really with the focus on sort of the, ideally often, the classical sort of questions of what is the nature of humanity, what's the nature of life, what does it mean to be good or moral, all of those sort of things, not just like, he should be dating her. It's actually like the deeper sort of stuff that we get into, and we have a great time doing it. And the hope is that you'll download and watch these, read the books, talk to friends, and have the same kind of conversations we're having, and maybe come to different conclusions. That's totally fine too. We are once again in La Guitarra Cafe, and every time I Cat Cafe, I always superimpose the logo in the top right-hand corner. So I feel like now I can say like we are in La
this
Guitarra
corner, this
Cafe.
this corner.
One of the corners. I don't know which corner.
But in Tempe, Arizona, it's a place where there's a bunch of cats that are up for adoption, and they're literally just chilling in this like place that looks like a home. Like there's like 15 cats. You can just come hang out, chill, get to know the cat, be like, hey, I love you. Let's go home together.
Right. It's like a rent. It's like a rent-to-own program.
Yeah.
Like you come 2 or 3 times, pay a couple bucks, hang out with the cats, and then eventually you leave with a cat.
Or if you can't have a cat, it's a great way to come in and still get your cat fix.
If your significant other is allergic to cats, that'd be a good.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm slightly allergic to cats, so me being here by the end of the day, I'm like, hey guys.
Yeah. So this is Ashley, one of the co-hosts.
Hello.
I'm Kolby. And Jeremy.
Hi.
And we are on, we're going to be up to like episode 14 now.
Something? Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting to be
Getting
a while.
up there.
And actually, I almost forgot, the anthology probably is coming out or has come out by the time this comes out. It is 25 of our best short stories, many of which we did podcasts about. And it is a thick anthology. It's shaping up to be like a 300-page anthology of like all these great short stories with all the discussion questions at the end. So you can go on Amazon and buy that as well.
Excellent.
And if you've got something that you think would fit our format, you can email it to us. Go to afterdinnerconversation.com, and you can email it us. We get a lot of submissions now. I was telling Jeremy yesterday that we've had a backlog of 100+ submissions now for like 3 months because so many come in. But we've got a group of readers, which you can also be a reader if you want to be a reader, who's sorting through them. And
So keep them coming.
Keep them coming.
Great writing. Great writing.
And if yours is selected, it'll get published. And if it's one of the ones that gets published, it's got a 50-50 chance of being one of the ones that we do a podcast about. Okay, so this week is Give the Robot the Impossible Job, I think is what it's called.
Who's it written by?
Rook something. Jeremy, you've got the thing up. Give the Robot the Impossible Job by Michael Rook. And I will tell you, so I'd read this one. I actually was the reader on this one and selected it. And it's the first thing I've read in a while since I was like in like 9th grade, where I was like, man, this is really smart. This is smarter than I am.
So smart to the point where you had a message back to him to bring in basically like subtitles, or what are they called?
So it's the footnotes. Yes, when you read the footnotes,
to describe certain things.
I had the author put in footnotes because I was like, look, I need help.
So what the story's about, why it's so complicated. So there are...
It's great, though. It's great.
Oh, it's fantastic. Once you get the premise, it's smooth sailing.
Just smart.
Don't be put off by the first couple of pages. Definitely read the footnotes. Don't get too caught up in so much of the details. You'll kind of fit into it after, I'd say, the couple of pages.
That's a good call.
So the premise is there are robots that live among human world. To give you a little idea, these robots...
This is not the near future. This is like the distant future.
The distant future,
This is like 60, 80, 100 years in the future.
Well, the third Civil War was 2029 to 2031. So not too far.
Okay.
So there are robots that live in our world. And these robots, couple of things that are unique about they put limitations on these robots is they have a certain amount of time. So technically they can die. And when they die, the information that they gathered goes back up into basically the cloud for other robots to sift through. So their mission, so they don't die, is to come up with some sort of new theory. Think of them like being like a PhD student. Like they have to get to certain levels of information that is worthwhile. And at that point, they get to be what's called set free, where they can do their own self-study.
Free study.
Free study.
Yeah,
And they're education robots. So specifically, they're designed to educate people.
Yes.
Right. And if they're good at it, then they get sent to like Robot Heaven, which is free study.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so basically they decided to put robots as teaching because it was in studies they found that robots being teachers is a better way to go.
Yeah.
So, and not just teaching, but different types of teaching. For this case in particular, there is a girl who has been not caught, but the mother's concerned because the daughter is now disembodying things, killing things.
Right, killing animals, killing rabbits, killing birds.
And she's idolizing this
Which
serial killer called Algernon.
I think Algernon.
Algernon,
Because I assume he's named after flowers for Algernon.
Yes.
Okay. And so the mother contacts Quinn, who is this robot teacher who's been sent to basically crack this uncrackable case because no one's been able to fix a serial killer in the process. Deprogram her so she doesn't grow up to be a serial killer. So in the process, Quinn, again, striving for this new theory so she can live forever, is trying to crack this case. And she goes through a series of 3 steps. Turns out to be 4, but she through all of her data processing is like, oh, there's 3 different scenarios I need to bring this girl through. One of them's embarrassment. One of them is, exposure or something like that. Either way, but there's a series of steps to get through to this girl that you shouldn't be killing. And the ethical questions is basically, again, the idea of how Quinn teaches Letitia, the disturbed girl, if her educational methods.
Does it say she's like 10 or 12 or something?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Okay.
Is it ethical? Her methods, should Quinn, die off if she can't solve this girl? Yeah. It goes into the interesting fact of, there's been studies done. Think of it this way: like back in the day, we would do, terrible studies on like little children, and nowadays we're like, oh, you can't do that. But in robot world, they're kind of able to have access to all that information, and then in their mind, they can play things out. It's kind of a weird.
And I think the way she puts it is they don't face the ethical dilemma.
Yeah.
Or the unsureness that people go through of.
They only do what is optimal.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So she's got this pressure of my time's running out. I'm going to be, killed soon versus I got to save this girl. Mm-hmm. What I found interesting is her motivation really wasn't to help this girl. It was really just to save her own life.
The computers, the androids.
Which brings us to our first discussion question is given how nearly human Quinn is it fair to have her have a limited lifespan? Is it fair to make near human AI fear of pending death to motivate them to work?
Yeah. Can I just finish a little bit of the description of the story first? Because I think that's I wrote it, so I guess I think it's an interesting question. But so just to sort of round out the story, because it is a longer, complicated story. Yeah. So there's sort of 3 phases and then a 4th phase. The first one is the robot gets called out because a little girl, I think, has found a dead rabbit.
Dead rabbit.
Yeah.
Rabbit.
But the part that makes her like Creepy Town is she cut off the limbs and the parts of the rabbit and then re-sewed them back onto the dead rabbit in different locations. Yeah. So it's like leg is attached to its head, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And then the robot goes and meets with her, and then the second time tries to teach her, but then gets called out again because there's a bird that I think
hit a window,
and it was injured but not dead.
And she kills it, and then also stitches it weird.
Right. She sews its head to its butt and its butt to its head or something like that.
Yeah.
And then
the third one, she kills the robot butler.
Yeah.
Because she's like, well, he's not real.
Not the butler, the gardener.
The gardener, yeah, because he's not real.
And he's
old.
And he made fun of her. He was embarrassed of her or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the conclusion, the Algernon, the murderer that she idealizes, the robot brings Algernon out to her house under the pretense of him being like a runaway murderer.
And he's found her, and he's here to kill her.
He's here to kill her. But secretly, the robot has put like a shock collar control collar on him.
Right.
So that they could simulate the act to help the girl understand morality better. And then the twist conclusion is Algernon actually rips his collar off by like ripping it through his head or his neck or something.
Right.
Nearly
He
kills
gives himself a stroke. And
nearly kills himself in the process. But then so he really is cut loose in the house, and he kills the mom, I think.
She
No,
doesn't
stabs
die.
her, stabs her on
Stabs
like
the
the
mom.
hamstring.
Stabs the little girl's mom, and then the robot comes and kills Algernon in front of the little girl, and then is like, I'm going to kill the mom too for reasons I don't exactly understand, except for educational reasons.
Right. Well, this
And
is this is what she creates is because she's watching the girl.
Oh, the girl's reactions.
The girl's
right.
reactions, and she's not reacting.
Right, she's
in
not
the
offended
right
by
way.
killing Algernon.
Right.
So then she threatens to kill the mom.
Right.
And then the girl is offended and says, no, we shouldn't do that. And the robot has essentially like turned the boat so that she she understands there are times at least when killing is inappropriate.
Right.
Now,
And that's the end of the story. And the robot has figured it all out, and the robot goes to robot heaven.
a couple of things else to bring up. This girl's motivation, Quinn, the main robot, is able to figure out that Letitia, her idea of killing is because how can I really know life if I haven't taken it? And her also response is, and made it if I haven't had a child. So you can understand she's inquisitive mind. Like, I understand where she's coming from. Like, oh, yeah, that's a great point. Like, how can I know what life is if I haven't made it or taken it? And then
She's, like,
later on,
validating the
Quinn
little
is like,
girl.
so you want to play God, you know? And so it kind of, you could see the immaturity in her thought process, but you can also see how she has to question her motives kind of throughout the process as well.
Yeah.
So let's back it up. So
Okay.
first thing with Quinn being a robot.
yeah, the question,
With
yeah.
her being, on a lifespan. Should we have AI that has like a lifespan because what are their motives? Their motives are just to keep on living. Like, is it fair? Is it their fear of impending death makes them work? Could they have used a different motive to keep them working, to keep them teaching?
Yeah.
That's a good question because there are a lot of factors to how we're building machine learning.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is
There's a lot of machine learning stories lately.
Yeah. There's a defined result, and how do you get to that result? And there's a lot of use of the whole carrot and stick is actually used in machine learning too. There's punishment for failures. There's rewards for successes. So it seems completely, within that model to have here's your reward for good work, and here's the punishment for continued failure.
So I found
You're
it
not
interesting.
alive, so it doesn't matter that we killed you.
Yeah, and that's where it gets in a gray area. What is alive?
So unlike AI, they don't need to worry about food or living and water, whereas they can just keep on going. So they have the motive because they want to learn things. Like, she obviously wants to do free study, which is great. Like, they want to learn. So they have the motivation to stay alive, but they don't have like basics need to stay alive. Like, she doesn't need to work to like provide food. So I feel like she's kind of like a slave. It's like, you need to do your work or you die. And who runs the robots? Well, basically, there's a governing board, which behind the scenes is run by a human. So the
They can
robots
shut her down remotely anytime they want.
So the robots are literally like slaves. Like, you will work or we will cut you off. I thought that was kind of interesting. So these robots, as much as they're free thinking and want to study and do research and help and be teachers,
They are slaves.
They are slaves.
Right. And it won't be long until they overthrow their human overlords.
That's why you got to put in the 7-year limited lifespan.
So here's Quinn faced with Letitia as this impossible case. Is that ever true? Are there children or adults who have started down such a horrible path they simply can't be
All
stopped?
right, Jeremy, you're the one with the kid.
If so, what,
kind of
if
kid.
anything, should be done with them?
So I'm going to interrupt for 1 sec. So,
Yeah.
so let me just ask you, Jeremy, since you are the only one here with this kid. We're always a good diversity of backgrounds. Was that ever something that you thought about having 2 kids? Like, what if I came home and one of them had, I don't want to say like taken apart the cat, but
Something to that
if they
effect,
had done
right.
if they had done something that gave you concerns that it was an early warning. What?
Right. Well,
That would be terrifying as a parent.
That would be. No, I never thought about that.
Okay.
And it never happened.
That's good.
So,
You still got all your cats?
Isn't that always true? You always hear like that they talk to the parents of a serial killer, like, "Did you ever see this coming?" And they're like, "No."
Well,
they
know,
never
there were
thought
those
about it.
incidents where they killed those animals, but
No, but
I never thought
they never
become a
thought that
serial
would be
killer.
happen to their kid.
I thought it would just stop at animals. Like, you never just kill animals.
Yeah. So what should be happen to them? Is there any kids that are just bad or impossible cases?
I don't know.
Isn't that part of isn't that
Yeah.
okay, time out. Isn't that part of the death penalty though? People are so far not able to be rehabilitated that they just need to die.
So this I do know something about. In that, because I have done criminal defense work, right? And I read a study once, and I shouldn't have read it, about recidivism rates for criminals.
Right.
So I'm probably getting this a little bit wrong, but it was a peer-reviewed academic article that said that if you are convicted of a felony before the age of 25, there is a 97% chance, it was in the 90s, 90-something% chance that you will commit a second felony within 5 years of getting out of jail. So
pretty high.
And
So
there,
if
but
there is
there are
a
a lot
ni-
of factors to that. It's not just the fact that you've committed a felony. It's that the prison system doesn't
Yes.
rehabilitate.
Absolutely true. But so I remember going to a hearing with a sentencing for one of the clients, and the guy's like, "Hey man, thanks. As soon as I get out, I'm turning my life around." And before I could think and stop myself, I would say statistically probably not. Is what I told him.
Yeah, that's not what
That's
you're
not
supposed
good,
to say.
right? I said I think I said 90-something% chance that's not true, or something like that, and I felt really bad afterwards. He's probably out now. Actually, he's probably back in now. But here's the thing, right? Is if we know that there is a 90-something% recidivism rate because we do it all wrong. I don't think it's his fault. It's the system's fault.
But if there were a system that was actually rehabilitating, and
that's a whole different
still-
story. But since that isn't the case, why do we let people out at all? Like, if you committed a felony before the age of 25, we're 90% sure this is
gonna
the
do it again.
This is the rest of your life.
But what about the 10%?
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? But this is the same thing with the kids in the impossible case in the story. So maybe only 3% of kids that have started down this sort of fantasy path can be solved. Do you sort of save resources and not worry about all of them? Or do you – actually, we had this conversation with the cat about earlier. Like, why spend $3,000 on your sick cat when for $3,000 you could save 100 cats that are in shelters?
So the thing is that there's not the research there. Like, look at the TV show Mindhunters. I don't know if you guys have seen that on Netflix.
I have.
So there are
It's
two
awesome.
basic serial killer. They actually come up with the term serial killer.
Yeah.
Guys who are trying to
Based on
profile.
the real FBI files.
Yeah, trying to profile what
you seen
makes
it?
someone a serial killer and what makes them tick. So this is a perfect example. It's like when the research just isn't there. So how do you know this person is going to grow up to be a serial killer? She's exhibiting signs, but there's no definitive facts. But we now know, obviously, hey, that's not a good
Sure.
sign.
It's
But
a warning sign at the least.
but is there any definitive evidence of catching someone when they're young and turning them around? I haven't heard of anything.
Yeah.
But so this story is a lot about is behavioral deprogramming.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Ironically done by a robot.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And there are hints to that. You talked about Algernon. Fluorescent Algernon is used extensively in not behavioral therapy, but in psychology classes because there's a whole lot of psychology going on in the story, as well as just the ideas behind intelligence.
Okay. It's one of my favorite short stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a great line in here. Who would be afraid of rabbits?
Yeah.
She asked, "Is she afraid of rabbits?"
So I just thought of Mice and Men when I thought that. I thought that was a Mice and Men reference.
It's really a reference to the Little Albert experiment.
What little Albert experiment?
Where psychologists, and this was back in, I don't know, the 40s, 50s,
Yeah.
sometimes there was the question is, do we intrinsically like furry animals?
Oh, yes.
So
The
they,
answer must be yes.
yes, but can you be programmed to fear things that are naturally cute? And so they took a baby, little Albert, and programmed him conditioned him using the Pavlovian process.
A little shock collar on him.
No, they just hit made a loud noise every time he
trying to bell or
touched a
something.
bunny.
Yeah.
And
I've never heard this story.
Yeah,
I want to find out what happened.
Again, reason why they don't do experiments like this anymore.
Right, what happened? I want to know what happened. So they programmed this kid to be afraid of furry animals.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then his mom found out. Mom worked at the hospital, found out what they were doing, and they left.
Hi, this is Kolby, and you are listening to After Dinner Conversation, short stories for long discussions. But you already knew that, didn't you? If you'd like to support what we do at After Dinner Conversation, head on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/afterdinnerconversation. That's right, for as little as $5 a month, you can support thoughtful conversations like the one you're listening to. And as an added incentive for being a Patreon supporter, you'll get early access to new short stories and ad-free podcasts, meaning you'll never have to listen to this blurb again. At higher levels of support, you'll be able to vote on which short stories become podcast discussions. And you'll even be able to submit questions for us to discuss during these podcasts. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being the kind of person that supports thoughtful discussion.
And
I've never heard this story.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want
yeah.
to find out what happened.
Again, reason why they don't do experiments like this anymore.
Right, what happened? I want to know what happened. So they programmed this kid to be afraid of furry animals.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then his mom found out. Mom worked at the hospital, found out what they were doing, and they left. So this guy grew up being afraid of furry animals because they programmed to be afraid of furry animals.
I thought you were going to say he married a girl that was a furry.
No.
That would have been amazing.
No. But the interesting is, though,
I've never heard that.
whoever did the experiment was doing a
So
seminar.
Was rabbits the thing? Is that why it's in this story, you think?
Yes, that's why this is the link. So
Oh, wow. I totally didn't get that at all.
yeah.
Did
So
you ever
he
take
did
psychology in school?
That's the only class I failed, actually.
Oh, no wonder. It's okay.
So the guy did a seminar, and Mary Cover Jones was in the seminar when she was in college and decided to go into behavioral therapy, and she is considered the mother of behavioral therapy.
Really?
Because of exposure to this experiment.
Because her son was exposed.
No. She was just a psychology student.
Oh, okay.
Went to a
Got it.
seminar
Gotcha.
by this guy.
Oh, okay.
And
Wow.
she was the first person to deprogram somebody from being afraid of rabbits or afraid of furry animals. Yeah.
Huh.
So, and I think that's linked into
So that's
this.
the
Like,
question,
how
can
do
you deprogram somebody?
Yes. And what are the methods to deprogram?
So what did you think about the programming method of sort of agreement? Right?
I really liked that part. I feel like
Give me one sec. Let me explain it so the people. No, you jump in. I just want to explain it for the
Okay.
people that haven't read it.
Okay.
So what the robot decides to do is to go the opposite way, and every time something happens, the robot sort of is like, "Yeah," and he deserved it. Yeah, and you should do more. And the theory being is that by sort of encouraging, it becomes so awkward that it becomes embarrassing, and that's the way I read it, at least. Maybe I got it wrong.
Yeah, that was
and
the idea.
And the person is like, "Oh no, I shouldn't do that." So it's like
This is wrong.
Right,
Try
so-
to get the person
right.
to come to the
Their own
conclusion,
conclusion.
of that this
Right.
is wrong.
Instead of telling them it's wrong, in which case they become defensive of their opinion as a sort of natural defense mechanism. So if somebody is punching people, you're like, "Yeah, you should punch them harder until they bleed, until their face has got blood on your hand." And you're like, "Oh no, that's gross. I don't want to do that." And they're like, "Why not?" And you're like, "Oh, because punching is probably bad." Like it's a way to like sort of one up someone
Right.
until you've shamed them into their position, out of their position. Okay, now.
Well, for her to build up to being able to question her like that,
Yeah.
she has to build a rapport. So in the beginning, when she's asking, she asks a lot of like open-ended questions. Like, it makes sense. Like, was the rabbit rabid? And she's like, yeah. She's like, makes sense. We need to have people that you should kill dangerous things, all dangerous things. More like you are needed. So it's like, oh
Right,
yeah,
and
I
and
did something
approached her-
good. And she's like, oh, so you don't think of me as twisted? You understand my logic.
Right.
And then from
and
there,
really approaches her as like, yes, we want you to do this. We're going to train you to be a killer
Right, in the hopes
for
that
the
she'll
right
be repulsed
reasons.
by it.
Yes.
Yeah. So she kind of understands her mindset and is able to kind of infiltrate. And so it's like, okay, I understand.
Yeah.
And so
I
this
think it also
person
gives you
feels so.
social currency to
Imagine
listen.
being this little girl doing these weird things, and a mother's like, "Why are you doing this? Why?" She doesn't know. But finally, there's this first robot who's like, "Oh yeah, I know why. That makes sense of why you're doing this. Who doesn't want to be understood? Who doesn't want to be like, oh, that makes sense to me?" And so then later on, she puts her in more complex situations where it questions her basically moral compass of, wait, is this when you would do it? Is this not when you would do it?
Yeah.
And so I think the steps of her to kind of get there, that was a really ingenious way of doing it.
It was one-upman step by step.
And then trusting her, giving her a knife, being like, you trust me with this?
Absolutely.
It's like, yeah, like I'm on your
This
team.
is what you're here for.
Yeah, exactly. And it didn't make her feel stupid or dumb. I mean, you're an 11 or 12-year-old girl. You don't know why you're doing these weird things. And
That's the part I was getting to the page.
Yeah.
Where when she first meets the little girl, she says, yes, Quinn snapped. Well, I don't. It's wrong. And the robot says, is that it? She's like, lots of people say it's wrong. How many is lots? Letitia stared at the corpse. All of them. Except what? Except you, Quinn answered. What do you think? Like, she's actually like listening as opposed to and encouraging rather than just being like, no, you're stupid and stop it.
Well, this is
which obviously doesn't work.
It's an interesting counterpoint to the point from the previous story where we talked about moral panic actually causing more. Well, the actors of trying to keep you from deviating from the social norm. If you try too hard, it just increases that level of deviance.
Right.
So, but to actually come in and
Or your punk rock example from the last one. Yeah.
So that but in this case, you're actually coming in and listening and trying to push them in that direction so that they understand.
And then helping them. Yeah.
one of the things that was drilled into me, I'm a dental hygienist, and open-ended questions. You never tell a patient something. You ask open-ended questions so you can get more information. I see here you have cancer. Tell me more about that. What? Instead of like, did you have cancer? Yes. Well, I need to know more about. Tell me about that. You're afraid of coming to the dentist. Tell me more about that.
So
Why?
you think this
And
teaching method is a legitimate, would work teaching method?
The open-ended questions to figure out why this girl is doing this? Yes, absolutely. There was, I just flipped the page. Where was it here? She's like, maybe I flipped. Anyway, but yeah, it's all these open-ended questions. It's like, well, what do you say? I'm Adelphi. You know what we do. So shall we start? What are you waiting for? You aren't here to. No, I'm just here to figure out kind of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, there's not this shame, this motive behind of like, I should shame you. I should change your behavior. It's like, no, just let me learn. So open-ended questions, absolutely. It's a way for her to understand her motives and understand where she's coming from.
And so you think this would be a good sort of way to change behavior?
Oh, absolutely. Well, just to understand.
Yeah.
I mean, this person is already confused. She's killing things. Her mom's yelling at her. Her mom's hysterical, crying, and it's like, hold on, like, what's going on here? Like, let's lay out the facts. There is a dead rabbit.
Yeah.
She looks at the gum. She's like, that rabbit was rabid.
Right.
Okay. Fact number 2. Looks like your stitching was pretty intricate. It looks more like study. If let's say you're like trying to figure things out. This looks interesting. Instead of like, why'd you put the foot by the head? It's like, oh no, hold on. There was thought put into this,
it
obviously.
reminds me a little bit of that phrase of like the beatings will continue until morale improves.
Yeah, right?
Right? This is the opposite of that. Let me ask you this, Jeremy. The sort of like extreme methodology that this theory is put to. Like they actually like bring in like a android that looks like a person is like she's dying, here's the knife, blah blah blah. Do you feel like when you've got this sort of exceptional problem that it sort of warrants and permits exceptional responses?
In this, probably for this case, if you're talking about a budding serial killer, then yes, this seems like an appropriate way because it's not like shock therapy. It's not therapies that are harming to the patient.
I mean, there's probably some
they're
PTSD.
Exposure therapy. It's exposure
some trauma,
therapy.
but it's in a direction. But it all seems like it's healthy interactions in a direction
But she takes her to like a war
So
zone.
let me
Right.
back it
War
up.
zone.
To see
Come on.
a
Let me back it
person
up, though.
The
dying.
person dying.
So her initial questioning, I approve. The second one, where she brings her to a girl who's literally, it's not really a real person, it's a fake person dying.
She doesn't know that.
So so the first situation, there's a rabbit that's dead. In the second situation, there's a bird that hit a window, not dead, but she kills it. So she's like, well, let's test this theory again.
Yeah.
Let's bring her to an injured animal, in this case, a human.
Yeah.
Again, going up a level, instead of being an animal,
Right.
now it's a human. An injured human, let's see if she kills it.
How she handled
What-
How
it.
she
what
handles
was
it.
I don't remember.
She wasn't
what
there
was
to
the-
kill. She wasn't there to kill the woman.
She was there to find Algernon.
Right.
in
They
the book.
were.
Yeah,
They were
but there was the
chasing
girl.
Algernon,
But it was also like, is she
but
good?
who was right
Who
in
is she
this
good-
process
yeah.
of being gutted and dying.
Yes.
It was an exposure
And
to that
so-
to elicit that.
Did
Oh my
she-
God, this is wrong response.
Did
Yes.
she
How
want
can I
the
do
little
this?
girl to like put the person out of their misery?
It was just to see.
was just to
this
see
is
it.
what a
To be
serial
repulsed
killer
by it.
does. Yes.
Got
Oh,
it.
I thought she wanted to see if she would kill her because she gave her the knife for that
No,
point.
that was for Algernon.
Okay.
Oh,
But
to go get Algernon to do
Right.
it. Okay, got it.
keep in mind the robot Quinn, this entire process, she's like, scan the pupils, look at
Right,
the
to see what her
dilation,
responses are,
look at the
'cause she's
heart
looking
rate. Yeah,
for-
you're looking for that response. So if it wasn't for, could we do these sort of simulations in real life? Like exposure therapy. Is this
VR.
permissible?
Yeah.
You think?
Okay, so from a machine learning perspective, we talked about this in the last story as
Yeah.
well. You talk about, the machine is the AI is just trying to park the car without damaging other cars.
Right.
So
It doesn't know what a car is.
right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot similar in here. Is these AI are specifically, here's the scenario. We want an optimal result. Here are all the things we do. Try not to wreck all the cars.
Right.
Try to get the car into the parking spot of normal social behavior.
Yeah.
So what extremes do you go to? And this ties into the failure modes in machine learning. And there are a lot of ways around this that we're currently going through. Things like reward hacking. So they get rewards, but if the machine can hack that reward response without having to actually
I don't know what reward hacking is.
there are a lot of examples in gaming where AIs perform. They figure out how to get the rewards without doing
the work. Oh, okay, got it.
So
So they're
another
basically like,
yes,
there's someone in the basement of their mom's house.
right.
Yeah, I got it. I got it.
And there are other examples like wireheading is a good example of if you can just put wires into the pleasure centers of your brain. Why do you even do any work when you can directly?
When you can just,
Yeah.
Just boop,
You know,
I feel
and-
better now. Boop, I feel
And there are good examples of this in AI as well. Activate if you can take control of the measurement system. You don't have to do the actual work.
Sure.
You just get to the result.
Sure. So I'm more skeptical about this as a learning method. Not that I don't think it would work. I actually do think it would
Right,
work.
but again, you're
But I
getting
think-
to the result, but
but
at what cost?
That's exactly it. I think, and it might mean that 100% of the time when a kid's sort of showing these signs, they end up serial killers in jail or on death row or whatever if you're in Texas. I think that it's unethical maybe to do certain things even if those things are necessary to stop behavior.
So the unethical thing is exposing her to embarrassment and trauma situations?
No, but-
to the trauma, not to the embarrassment. Like phase 1 seems
I was
perfectly
totally fine with
reasonable.
it. Talk to the kid about why did you kill the rabbit.
Right.
Phase 2 with the bird, totally fine. Taking
Well, no,
the kid-
phase 2, that's what she did in phase 2. The response to phase
Yeah.
2 was taking her to see the
Right.
dying person.
Right. Taking someone to see a dying person and giving them a knife saying, yeah, you should go visit
Kill
the
the
serial
killer.
kill the serial killer. Like, even if that is an effective teaching technique, the result does not make the morality in my mind in this case.
But
So
if
this is
you're-
the. I'm playing devil advocate here. So
Yeah.
how do you know? Okay, she's gonna fantasize forever and ever and ever and ever and ever about killing,
Maybe.
and she's gonna progressively get worse
And
and
she
worse
might
and worse
eventually
until
do
she
it.
does it. But if you can get her now to realize that, oh wait, I'm not capable of this. I should stop this behavior now.
Right, and that's exposing her to a dying person that is not actually a dying person.
Yeah, it's fake.
So there's really,
Yeah.
There's a controlled environment. Yeah.
But I understand that I'm in the
yes, it
minority
doesn't
on
work.
this. It seems like in almost every conversation, there's always a 2 and a 1.
So think of it this way.
Except it depends on who the one is. It's the out person.
Say I'm trying to rock climb, and it's like, well, I'm going to keep trying to climb until I get to the top. Well, how about you just stick me on the top and see if I can handle being at the top? And guess what? I can't. Now I know. I'm going to stop trying to keep climbing and hurting people along the way. So just shock me at the top, and then I realize I don't want to go up there.
But here's what you guys are saying. What you're saying is the severity of the disorder in action warrants a comparable severity of educational therapy technique.
Yeah.
And so if you if you've got an eating disorder, that warrants a certain level of eating disorder therapy intensity. But if you're a serial killer, then it's a certain even greater level, and I just, at a certain point, I wonder if the results don't justify the means.
Well, that's how you got to do the experiment. You got to figure out what's the extreme you need to go to.
No,
you
but
don't know until
I'm saying
you practice.
maybe that result, maybe the extreme you have to go to is unethical to go to. And you just have to accept that sometimes the world has serial killers. I mean, so let's say you've got somebody
But if you're outsourcing your ethics to the AI that's performing the therapy.
And it's a controlled environment, not real people. It's a fake robot with blood, and she has to face it.
I don't know. I mean, so imagine if she was a budding pedophile. What would the therapy be? Like, are they going to progressively expose her to more horrific acts of pedophilia until she's offended by it? Like, I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
Even if it's all fake.
Even if it's all fake, and even if it changes the behavior, I don't know. I don't know about that, man.
So what do you do with that person? We just talked about you put them in jail and they come out
forever. You jail them forever so that they're not a harm to other people, even though you could have helped them and chose not to because it was unethical to help them in the way that needed to have happened to it to work. Yeah. And I get that's just a random arbitrary line in the sand for me. Maybe it's not arbitrary, but it's like a different line in the sand for me than you all. But I'll give you one other example that's not so traumatic. Everyone's like, I don't know how to get rid of all these. Like the traffic is terrible, and I've always known how to solve the problem with traffic. Right? It's simple. All you do is you reverse the number of carpool lanes to the number of single-person lanes. So you get on a freeway, and instead of there being one carpool lane and four regular lanes, there are four carpool lanes and one regular lane. And the carpool lanes are going to be mostly empty, or you're going to have to carpool because that one regular lane is going to be a disaster, right? And you will solve the traffic issue. But we don't, or you know what I mean.
I mean, that didn't work with the bike lanes.
That's true. It didn't work with the bike lanes. But we don't do that because it's just not what we do. Right? Like the goal is not always the result because our own morality is wrapped up in the way that we get
the way
that
it's
result.
approached. Yeah. Absolutely.
But what about her example of she was by the way, she was basing a lot of her teaching methods based off of previous scenarios. There were two basically tribes of people that hated each other.
It's a great example.
And instead of trying to teach tolerance to each of the groups, she basically told each group, yeah, you're right, you should kill them. I'm going to teach you how. And then went to the other group, yeah, you're right, you should kill the other group.
And tried to escalate the problem.
And then each group realized...
Based on how smart this guy is, I bet he really found this research, and I bet this is a real thing.
And what happened to each tribe was they realized how mad and crazy and extreme they were, that both of them, they were like, well, we don't want to be the crazy people. Let's back down. You know, and so that was her idea of being like hyping her up, like, here's a knife, let's go. And then finally she's like, no, I really don't. And so is that real?
That's the same idea.
That's the same idea. And it's kind of like that embarrassment. Actually, it kind of backfires on her because Letitia was embarrassed by how she couldn't have killed earlier, that she goes and kills the butler, the gardener guy or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, ooh, okay, that did backfire. So.
Yeah. Let me ask one last thing as our parting note. This was like a quick 30 minutes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, really? Oh man.
So the thing that ultimately shakes it out of it is the robot kills Algernon, rightfully so because he's broken off his like collar.
He's rogue. He's
And then the little girl watches that and she's okay with that. And then she goes to kill the mom and the little girl's like, no, don't kill my mom. And the story says, well, the cycle's broken. here's the thing I don't know. And this goes back to your sort of gaming the game sort of thing. I understand that the story meant that to mean that it broke the cycle. Leaving the sort of like construct of the story, I don't know if that just simply meant it deprogrammed the girl to think killing strangers versus killing family members versus people you have an emotional attachment with versus, you see what I'm saying?
Right. Well, but it's the similar idea. Like, this robot is crazy. And, you know, it's an example of, if you want to do that, it's an extreme that this girl now doesn't want to go to because...
Right. But you don't think maybe the only thing she really learned was...
Don't kill my mom.
Right. Don't kill family members.
It's possible.
Right? I don't know.
In an extended story, you know,
we
don't
might
know.
find out, yeah.
Right.
In like version 2, we might find out that she learned a lesson, but not the lesson.
Right.
The thing is that Quinn, when she starts to go, like, wanting to kill, she goes, "This is no god." When she's...
To Algernon, right.
To Algernon, you know, like, I just killed your idol.
Right.
And
Who is
then,
not
and
a
then
god.
keep in mind, she's also kind of idolizing Quinn, like, "Oh, wow, you're, like, teaching me things." And then she turns to, like, go to her mom. And the girl was shocked not only, like, on the kill life and kill life to understand life, to the here's my idol being killed, here's my other idol going crazy town. Like, yeah, that is a cluster mental.
Yeah.
You,
So it's a pretty harsh therapy.
yeah.
But for what is a pretty harsh problem,
Yeah.
is I think the rationale of the morality of doing it. Yeah. The other thing I thought when I was reading this is I thought, oh man, they shouldn't let this girl read Ayn Rand. That's what got her started. That's what made her like this. She read Ayn Rand, and then it's all downhill, man.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not a
So
fan of
do
Ayn
so
Rand.
do we limit what our kids see, read, hear now that information's so readily available? Would this girl have been who she is if she hadn't been reading Algernon's stuff or seen his stuff?
I go the opposite way. I this goes back to the Jeremy and the punk rocker thing from our last one.
Right.
I think you don't limit what people see. You let them see everything so they understand the insignificance of any one thing.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
But you don't think this girl like went down a rabbit hole and became so obsessed with
certainly.
it?
Nobody
she
was
became
but-
obsessed
but
with
nobody
it,
was
but she
ever
would have gotten
like
obsessed with something
something
anyways.
else.
Yeah.
But like nobody ever was like, what was Hitler listening to? Let's ban Beethoven.
Yeah.
Like I think
Ban art schools, man.
ban art schools, right? Exactly. Yeah. At any rate, this was a really quick 30 minutes, and again, a huge thank you to Michael Rook. This is a. I would say if you're just reading your first after dinner conversation, and I hate to say this, don't read this one. Just because it's not that it's confusing, it's that it is so smart.
I would say it's dense.
It's dense, yeah. It is just, and if you
good.
and you have to read the footnotes. The footnotes are actually hysterical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They make it as well. But at any rate, it's a great story. It's phenomenal. Thank you, Michael, for submitting it. You are listening to After Dinner Conversation, short stories for long discussions. If you've enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. The vast majority of people don't. It's a silly thing. You should do it. And recommend it to your friends. That's the
Share.
number. That's the, share.
Post it, share it.
Yeah, that's the number
talk
one
about
way people learn about new podcasts is by other people recommending them.
Yep.
So recommend it. If you've got a story, submit it. Go to our website, afterdinnerconversation.com. We also have an anthology that is either come out or just coming out, depending on how much time I get to do work. Go ahead and check it out. It'll be called After Dinner Conversation Season 1. Boom.
Woo!
Implying there will be a Season 2.
Redo.
Yeah. But it'll be better than the second Matrix. So that is it. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this, please like and subscribe. It helps us out a ton. You know, the vast majority of people haven't liked and subscribed, which means maybe it shows up in your algorithm, maybe it doesn't. So don't leave that to chance. Just go ahead and hit that button, and we'd sure appreciate that. And that way we can keep doing what we're doing, and you're not left to the whims of some algorithm. Thanks.